Good evening, everybody. Before we get started, just a quick announcement. The Reno Police Department is doing a training tonight in the building. So if you hear a lot of sirens or you see a lot of police presence and people running around the SWAT team, don't panic. It's part of a training exercise. Nothing's going on. So just wanted everybody to be aware of that.
Okay, can folks hear me? Okay.
Harris, could you say something else so we can test your volume?
Yeah, can anyone hear me?
Yep, we can hear you good.
Great, thanks.
Sorry, Harris, did you want to chair this meeting as your last meeting, or would you want us to take charge?
Sorry, I figured since I wasn't in person, it would be easier if someone who is in person would share. It looks like the vice chair is there.
Yes, all right. Well,
Yeah, sorry about that. I kind of took that for granted. Apologies. I didn't need to keep everybody hanging there. But I guess I'll just participate as a regular panelist for my last meeting.
terrific. Good to know. We're going to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. How about Commissioner Velto lead us?
Pledge allegiance.
All right, we'll do our roll call.
Harris Armstrong,
Here.
Carrie Romeyer,
Here.
Manny Becerra,
Here.
Christina Del Villar,
Here.
JD Draculich,
Here.
Alex Velto,
Here.
Sylvia Villanueva.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Excellent. We'll open it to public comment. And this public comment is for any item that's agendized or any general public comment. Do we have anyone on Zoom?
Not at the moment. Let me read the language in. Members of the public may call into the meeting to provide public comment by using the Zoom link provided on the agenda, specifically https://links.reno.gov/P C 12-18-24. It should be noted for those in the audience that comments are to be addressed to the Planning Commission as a whole. Comments heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the Planning Commission agenda. Please note that the Planning Commission may not take action upon any matter not agendized for possible action on today's agenda. When you are called on for public comment, please state your name for the record and begin speaking. The timer will begin when you say your name, and you will be afforded 3 minutes. If you are an attendee in the Zoom meeting and would like to make public comment at this time, please raise your hand. Lastly, while in this room, please be respectful. Warnings will be issued by the presiding officer if there is disruptive behavior, and you will be asked to leave chambers if the behavior continues. We do not have anyone with their hands raised in Zoom. I do not have any public comment forms for this particular item.
Do we have anyone in chambers wishing to speak under general public comment? Seeing none, we'll close that. All right, opening approval of the minutes. Those would be from the November 21st, 2024 meeting.
Commissioner Valto, move to approve.
Commissioner Becerra, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Draculich, I was absent, so I'll say, sorry to interrupt.
Motion passes. All right. Yes, I'm going to ask the commission if they're okay with changing the agenda item order so that item number 6, this case LDC 2500021 Royce, would be interested in going first.
Okay, here.
All right, well, I think we can make that happen. So we will begin the public hearing with a presentation from staff.
All right, good evening, members of the Planning Commission. Jeff Foster, Associate Planner for the record. The first case that I am bringing you tonight is the Royce Casita, LDC 25-21. This is an approximately 1.12 acre site on the north side of Sharp Hill Circle at the intersection of Sharp Hill and Circlestone Court. It's developed, in Somerset. It's developed with a single-family home, and the request before you tonight is a major deviation to increase the allowable accessory structure square footage by about 44%, which would thereby allow an approximately 1,150 square foot casita. Zooming in, you can see that there are single-family residences in all directions, and the two issues that staff looked at in the staff report are compatibility with surrounding land uses as well as site design. The zoning is Somerset Planned Unit Development, Somerset PUD, and the master plan land use is large lot neighborhood, and here are 4 policies from the master plan that support the proposed request. A little bit of background, the Somerset PUD handbook includes development standards for the estate homes villages, in which one of those villages the proposed project lies in. The PUD handbook limits the maximum accessory building coverage to 800 square feet and a single story. As you know, the Planning Commission has the power to grant a major deviation of up to 50% of allowable development standards. In this case, a 50% increase would allow up to a 1,200 square foot accessory structure. To the left, you can see the Somerset Owners Association Aesthetic Guideline Committee approval letter for this project. In terms of compatibility with surrounding land uses, most homes in the area do not have separate guest quarters, but the request is not unprecedented. In fact, at least 3 other estate homes in the area have detached casitas, including 2 in the immediate vicinity shown here. There will be a significant distance between the proposed casita and the adjacent homes. You saw the AGC, the Aesthetic Guideline Committee approval letter on the previous slide, and staff is recommending condition number 5 for the allowable days and hours of construction. Given the above, the proposed casita appears to be generally consistent with surrounding land uses. In terms of the proposed design, the casita has a kitchen and is set back approximately 2 feet farther than the existing primary structure, so it is outside of the front yard as required by code. The PUD handbook requires a parking space for every bedroom The proposed one-bedroom casita does include a single-vehicle garage and room on the driveway for 2 additional vehicles. The proposed landscape trees will comply with the minimum size requirements listed in the approval letter 2 slides previous, and no uplighting is proposed. Here are the recommended findings for a major deviation. Staff can make all recommended findings, and here's the recommended motion. I will also point out that the applicant is not planning on making a presentation, but they are present here should you have any questions.
Thank you. We'll open this item up for public comment. This would be public comment specific to 6.1, Royce Casita. Do we have anyone?
No, I don't think we have anyone on Zoom. We don't have any comment cards, voicemails, or correspondence for this item.
Very good. Do we have anyone in chambers wishing to speak on this item? That looks like a no. So we'll go ahead and close the public comment and open it up to questions from the commission.
Do we want disclosures or anything like that?
Very good. As you can see, I'm filling in the first time. We'll take disclosures from the commission, starting with Commissioner Becerra.
Familiar with the site, read and reviewed materials, and that's it.
Commissioner Villanueva, no disclosures.
Commissioner Del Villar, no disclosures.
Commissioner Volto, no disclosures.
Commissioner Draculich, familiar with the neighborhood.
Commissioner Armstrong, no disclosures.
Commissioner Rohrmeyer, the same. Very good. Does anyone on the commission have questions for staff or the applicant?
Yeah, I just have one question, and for me, it was just trying to really understand the difference between like Somersets, like CCRs, PUD, Reno, just trying to kind of package it all in my head so I can understand it a little better.
So the PUD handbook, sorry, Jeff Foster, Associate Planner. The PUD handbook does limit the maximum allowable size of a detached guest quarters basically to 800 square feet. However, they're effectively under the same tools for deviations, i.e. a major deviation, for the city of Reno that would allow up to a 50% increase. So, yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay.
That was all I had.
Any other questions?
I'm prepared to make a motion.
Okay.
In the matter of case number LDC 25-00021, based upon compliance with the applicable findings, I move to approve the major deviation subject to the conditions listed in the staff report, and I can make all the findings.
Commissioner Villanueva, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Sorry, I was on mute, but aye.
The case passes unanimously. Good luck with your project. Now we will reopen the unfinished business, and that would be the LDC 25-0014 Web Data Center. We'll start with a presentation from the applicant, or I'm sorry, with the staff. Start from the staff.
Okay, Jeff Foster, Associate Planner for the record. The second case I'm bringing you tonight is the continuance of the Web Data Center from 2 weeks ago, LDC 25-14. I was actually not planning on making a presentation tonight, but Commissioner Villanueva did not have a chance to view the hearing from 2 weeks ago, so I will go ahead and make the presentation. Okay, so as a refresher, the site is about 6.02 acres in size, located on the north side of North Virginia Street, about 1,100 feet east of its intersection with Stead Boulevard. The site is comprised of 3 vacant parcels. And a frame of reference, you can see the Amazon facility here that it's just to the south of. The request before you is a conditional use permit to allow the development of a data center as well as operations between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. As you recall, the Planning Commission approved another case in March of this year on this same site. That was a request for a conditional use permit to allow 24-hour operations, grading resulting in fills greater than 10 feet, and disturbance of a major drainage way associated with an industrial warehouse development. That request included the same 3 subject parcels along with a 4th parcel that contained the major drainage way. Again, that 4th parcel is not a part of the current request. Zooming in, you can see that the site is primarily surrounded by industrial uses to the north, east, and south, as well as a vacant parcel to the west. There are also multiple non-conforming residential uses. Specifically, there's a mobile home park about 470 feet to the east, shown here, separated from the site by a parking lot and a business development. There's a second mobile home park located about 550 feet to the northwest, shown here, and that is separated from the subject site by a parking lot. There's also a third mobile home park shown here further to the southwest. The key issues that staff analyzed are compatibility with surrounding land uses and site design. And I also included on this slide kind of an encapsulation of the key issues that were addressed at the Planning Commission 2 weeks ago, namely the ability of NV Energy to supply power to the data center, sustainable design and operations elements, as well as Ward 4 equity. Again, the zoning district is mixed-use suburban, and the master plan land use is industrial, and here are 6 policies and goals from the master plan that support the proposed request. A little bit of background on data centers. On January 25th of this year, an administrative interpretation was issued that added the definition of a data center into Reno Municipal Code. I'm not going to read the long definition of a data center, but I do have it if you would like to know more. Data center is now recognized as a permitted use in the MS zone with the approval of a conditional use permit. Data centers are recognized as having significantly less truck traffic and loading and unloading requirements and the need for dock doors as opposed to warehouse and distribution centers. Data centers typically do not require many dock doors, so the use standard from the administrative interpretation does limit the number of dock doors to 3 per building, and the parking is required to be a minimum of 1 space per 3,300 square feet. Those are the only 2 use standards in code for data centers. Moving on to compatibility with surrounding land uses, the proposed project does involve 24-hour indoor operations. The area is generally characterized by industrial zoning and uses that would allow 24-hour operations indoors by right. There is a residentially zoned property. The nearest one is 1,500 feet away, shown up there, and is separated from the site by the freeway, as well as intervening land uses. There are significant buffers between the site and the 2 non-conforming mobile home parks within 550 feet. Again, those are shown here. And it is anticipated that the indoor operations would not have impacts on those 2 non-conforming uses. There is a proposed truck dock and drive-up door on the northwest corner of the building, and staff is recommending condition number 5 to limit the hours of truck arrivals and departures, idling, and on-site movement as a result of the location of that truck dock and drive-up door. And staff is also recommending condition number 6, which is the standard limitation on construction hours. With all of that, the proposed use is generally compatible with existing land uses in the area. Moving on to site design. The site plan includes 2 chiller yards and a backup generator yard with about 10 emergency generators, which are only to be used during a power failure and during necessary periodic testing and maintenance, and that's per condition number 7. One of the chiller yards faces North Virginia Street, and that's shown here. And the generator yard is also visible from North Virginia Street, shown here. The chillers are about 10 feet tall, and the pipe with additional height for piping, and the generators are about 25 feet tall. There's a 15-foot tall screening security fence proposed to screen the chillers and the piping along with most of the height of the generators, and the location of that fence is shown here. The proposed street tree canopy along North Virginia will obscure the visibility of the top of the generators, and the southernmost generator will be painted a custom color to coordinate with the building color per condition number 8. Continuing with site design, the mixed-use suburban zone requires a minimum of 20% landscaping, which the project does propose. The project also includes a 20-foot landscape buffer between the sidewalk and the screening fence, with a mixture of deciduous and evergreen trees in that buffer area, in a staggered arrangement at 2 elevations, which would help obscure the screening and security fence, the top of the generators, and the building per condition number 9. Here are the recommended conditional use permit findings. Staff can make all recommended findings. And here's the recommended motion. I did also want to call your attention to the memo that was sent around earlier today with additional conditions that are actually requested by the applicant to fall in line with sustainable development and operations. So those additional conditions would also be a part of the recommended motion. I'm available for any questions, and the applicant is going to make a presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, if the applicant can come up and give their presentation.
Forward, backward. Dave Hardy with Ellis Partners. Great to see you all again, and thanks for having us back. Also want to thank Jeff and Reno staff for all their hard work over the last 2 weeks. And we have a lot to cover with this presentation, so I'm going to move fairly quickly. And Jeff also covered a lot of similar topics, so happy to circle back for anything that we pass by quickly. Here's the agenda: quick intro to Ellis Partners in Colivore, a brief discussion of what the project is within the zoning, cover the NV Energy commitments and the energization schedule, and then we also want to talk about some of the economic benefits to Reno that the data center will be bringing. First, an introduction to Ellis Partners. So we are a 31-year-old real estate investor and developer. Really at heart, we're a mixed use and retail and office developer, and we've been executing projects all over Northern California, and we also have a deep history in industrial development, and we're really excited to be introduced to Reno by this project. Colivore, who's our tenant and data center operator, they are founded in 2012, and they're a pioneer of liquid-cooled, high-density data centers. Their Santa Clara facility has been awarded for reducing carbon emissions next to its industry peers. And really what Colivore, the service they offer is a scalable and cost-effective enterprise network solutions for small businesses. So, for example, their Santa Clara facility is about 1/3 of the size of the project that we are proposing, and there are currently 40 different companies who are operating their servers out of that facility. So when Colivore gets ready to open this facility in Reno, they will go out and have a marketing campaign to the local business community, offering their services and a well-managed, efficiently managed data center for them to house their equipment in. Here's just the site location. Jeff touched on this, but the use is compatible with the surrounding uses. And the master plan and zoning, it's all zoned industrial, so the project is compatible with the master plan. And here is just on the top is a picture of the existing use permit that was approved by this commission back in March. That's for a 164,000 square foot industrial warehouse. And then our project on the bottom, it's actually a smaller site and then also a smaller project overall. It's half the size at 82,000 square feet. But before I move on from this, I just want to touch on a couple of things that Commissioner Del Villar and Dean and I discussed in our meeting this morning. One of those is just the noise that will be generated. So as Jeff mentioned, we have a noise analysis that's been done for the project, and it shows that even when the generators are in use, the noise level at the nearest properties will actually still be below the ambient noise level at those properties. Furthermore, so just as a way of example, at Colivore's current facility in Santa Clara, over an 11-year history of operating, their generators have only run for an hour and a half of total unplanned runtime. So it's very infrequent and very minor. So they're not going to be generator noise frequently disturbing the community. Also, just with the use compatibility, we are, as I mentioned, Ellis Partners is really a lot of our history has been in developing, mixed use and community serving uses, and we would love to find opportunities to invest in those types of uses throughout Reno and Ward 4. This site is, as we've covered, is unfortunately not compatible with those uses. This I'll gloss over, but this is, what is a data center? There's a lot of data centers, from small ones to large ones, user-owned, co-location, and there really are foundational pieces of the modern economy. And Colavor's facility is a 30 megawatt co-location facility. The web data center project, we're proud to say that it really aligns with the master plan, as we discussed, not only from the use, but also from the goals and visions of the master plan to foster growth in high-tech knowledge-based industries, advanced telecommunications, and to diversify the labor pool. And I'm happy to be able to talk about this slide with you all today. Sustainability is something that's core to Ellis Partners and really dear to us, and we try our hardest to implement on every project, and we know it's really important to this commission. And so we have been working with all our stakeholders, our vendors, equipment suppliers, with our friends at NV Energy to explore the viability of doing a solar array on the project. And we are happy to announce today that we are committing to do that, to do a roughly 4,000 square foot array on top of the front of house area of the project. And we have provided the written commitment to deliver that to the city. And then what we show up here, that's not on here because we had to submit this yesterday before we were able to make this commitment, but what we show here is all the other above code sustainability features of the project that we discussed at the last meeting. And now I'll turn it over to Dean Rubinson, who's Ellis Partners Director of Development, to take you through the NV Energy status.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you to our friends at NV Energy who've joined us today and were on some of the meetings with many of you over the last couple of weeks. We know that Condition 4 was the subject of discussion at the prior meeting, and we hope that between the information that we've provided and the conversations that we've facilitated, you're all comfortable that we have the commitments needed from NV Energy, and the timeline by which they can deliver that power is consistent with our timeline for delivery and energization. And I'll go through that in a few minutes. But as you know, this body approved the Peavine substation last April. It is under construction and will be ready for use by October of 2026, well in advance of our first phase of energization. We have an NV Energy will serve letter for the full phase, for the full need for the facility. Phase 1 is about 40% of our demand of about 12.5 MVE, and second phase is 17.5. So the first phase of our facility, which we anticipate coming online in early 2027, will be served by Peavine Bank 1. Peavine Bank 1 is under construction, will be delivered as shown here on October 26th. And the amount of infrastructure needed for us to connect to Peavine Phase 1, to Peavine Bank 1, is literally some wires coming from the overhead lines across the street from us. So the generation, delivery, distribution infrastructure is either in place or under construction. Bank 2 of the Peavine substation is being catalyzed by this project. We're funding a significant sum of money to the NV Energy to procure the equipment, construct the facility so it can be in place for our needs for Phase 2 by the beginning of 2029. We're only going to be using a part of the Bank 2 capacity. So our catalyzation of that construction will create additional capacity for the region, or for the area, beyond what we need. This is a list of the agreements that we are in process with NV Energy and have been working with them since last May. I'll show you this in a more visually easy to digest format, but essentially all the agreements will be signed by next summer. The majority of them will be signed by the end of January of next year. This is a Gantt chart showing the overlay of the NV Energy agreements on the top section and our design, permitting, and construction and energization in the middle. The cluster of green boxes in the top left representing the agreements that we expect to have signed, both the procurement of apparatus for the Phase 2 and the Bank 2 of Peavine, as well as the design approval agreements and the Phase 1 line extension agreement will all be signed by the end of January, we anticipate, of next year. And then by the end of June, we expect to be able to sign the Phase 2 line extension agreement. And as you can see here, the construction, which would follow our design and permitting in 2025 for Phase 1, would complete itself by the end of 2026 for our shell. The Phase 1 TI work would continue on until Q3 of 2027. And the green box sitting out there in the middle at the end of 2026 is the energization of Phase 1. So we have even a 9-month cushion within this schedule in case there's some delay with the energization of Peavine Bank 1. So the second phase would be complete, of our construction would be complete by the end of 2028 in advance of the energization of Bank 2. So we're confident that our timing and NV Energy's timing are aligned, and they are here to answer any questions, pull up any documents, should there be any additional questions. In terms of revenue, this is obviously very important to the city of Reno. We did a lot of research over the last couple of weeks. We were actually surprised pleasantly at the volume of revenue that will be generated both annually and immediately with this project. So this project, over its 30-year lifespan, is estimated to generate $165 million in additional revenue just to the city of Reno. That's not including the county or the state. That breaks into 3 categories: the sales tax revenue, $2.8 million per year of annual sales tax revenue. The facility will have over $1 billion worth of server equipment in it. That server equipment has a 3 to 5 year lifespan. So as that server equipment is continually replaced, Reno's portion of the sales tax revenue will be $2.8 million annually. The power usage will result in a franchise tax of $1 million a year for the city of Reno. Lastly, the property tax and real estate taxes will generate 1.7 of incremental revenue to the city of Reno annually, coming up with 5.5 million annually. This is approximately 10 times the revenue that would be estimated for a comparable sized industrial facility, distribution, warehousing, et cetera. In terms of more near term, the construction jobs starting in 2026 and the purchase of equipment for the project will generate approximately 1.7 million for the city of Reno, as well as labor hours projected for the shell work and the tenant improvement work of 500,000 hours of construction labor. We're represented here by DevCon, our contractor, and they will be hiring the vast majority of their trades from the local community. Move on. So in terms of catalyzing tech growth, this facility, being a co-location facility, will attract other companies to Reno because most of the use of this facility, beyond what's already serving local Reno businesses, will be businesses out of the area, high-tech users who will be exposed and will be coming to Reno to maintain their servers, update their servers, and will spend time in downtown and will be exposed to Reno, and it could attract them to Reno as a destination for a perhaps a satellite office, perhaps eventually relocating their headquarters here. The project will also reduce the number of server closets that are in offices all around the county. that can allow them to co-locate here. So much of the energy usage that we will be utilizing will actually be offset by the reduction of those server closets which are no longer needed. Good for the economy, $166 million over the 30-year life. As our planner Jeff mentioned, there will be much reduced traffic compared to other uses, a reduction in demand on public services, a variety of highly skilled jobs, both construction jobs and a range of jobs within the facility that I'll get to in a moment, and catalyzing Reno's high-tech growth. In summary, the project is consistent with Reno zoning and master plans. It's half the size of the project that was approved on this site 9 months ago. It will generate 10 times the revenue for Reno at a fraction of the traffic and impact on public services. There'll be 17 full-time jobs with an average income well over the local AMI, and dozens of jobs for other vendors, contractors, maintaining the facilities, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and service equipment in here. So there'll be a significant amount of additional jobs. We have the commitments from MV Energy, and we believe we are coming forward with sustainability measures. And we've heard you. We understand how important that is to all of you. We're proud of this project, and we ask for your support. Thank you.
Right. I believe we open it up to public comment. Do we have anyone on Zoom who wishes to speak?
No one on Zoom has their hand raised at this time.
Okay, we'll shift to the folks in the room. We have 3 public request to speak forms. We'll begin with Taylor Adams.
Good evening, members of the Commission. For the record, Taylor Adams, Chief Executive Officer at Economic Development Authority of Western Nevada, commonly called EDAWN. In the interest of brevity, knowing that there are others who are going to speak here, I'll just open by saying we fully support everything that the applicant has brought forward this evening. We think this is exactly the type of development that's driving our economy forward. There was a letter that we provided to each member of the Commission earlier today. I'll just reference that letter and the points that are made in there regarding traffic, tax base, and the investment in the community. And we do hope that you'll find a way to support the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Doug Brown?
Hello, good evening. Doug Brown, DevCon Construction. I'm DevCon Construction's Reno branch manager. DevCon has had a Reno office here since 2000. I've been their branch manager since 2004. And as Dean mentioned and Dave alluded to, Ellis Partners and Colvor have selected us as their design build general contractor for this. This is the second data center that we have worked on collaboratively with this team. And I think it's significant that they've recognized the need to use local general contractors and local subcontractors and vendors. Because if you look around, most of the data centers coming here in this data center boom, first of all, they aren't necessarily focused on coming into the core of the cities or going to the outward counties and other jurisdictions. But they're also using general contractors, designers, architects that aren't local here. They're bringing them in from all over the country, and this team has done that and made a significant investment. And using a company like DevCon has been here for 25 years and owns a building here in Reno and employs 30 people, and will use the vast majority, most of our projects is 95 to 100% of our subcontractors and vendors are sourced right here from Reno, Washoe County, and northern Nevada. As far as the labor, you saw 500,000 hours. That's probably very, very close. We look at this thing, and if you put that on the average scale out there of $75 to $95 in the tradesmen, you come to about $40 million to $45 million, somewhere in that range is where I was estimating it. And over a 3-year period for architects, engineers, laborers, everyone else is going to be involved in this. That's a significant amount of employment for our construction trades here. Then outside of the construction trades, like you said, there's probably about $80 million. This overall project is probably going to be about $150 million, with about $100 million of that from the construction contract and about $80 million of that carved out to our local subcontractors. It's a huge dollar amount, whereas if you were to go through there, and DevCon's put up 9 buildings in the North Valleys. We know what they cost. If we were to go do that 100,000 square foot building on that same parcel, like we've done so many others there on North Virginia, it would be about about a 12 to $20 million project. This one's going to be about 150 million, somewhere in that range. So 7.5 to 20 or 7.5 to 12 times more than your standard building out there. And again, that revenue is coming back to the contractors and vendors here in this community. Something that we highly support and applaud them that they've shown that they want to use the local businesses here. We hope this goes forward. And the other thing is to keep some of the construction guys from going out to Trick doing all those data centers. We have a lot of our guys in Ward 4 that live out there and in Reno doing that drive every day out there to Trick and to Fernley. Is, hey, keep them here, not only work and live here, but build here too.
All right, thank you. Len Savage?
Good evening, Chairman Armstrong, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. I thank you for allowing the time here. My name is Len Savage, President, CEO of Savage & Son, Nevada's oldest contractor, 131 years, Nevada license number 10. As a family business, we're humbled and honored and proud to fully support this web data center here in Reno, Nevada. As you can probably imagine, we get approached by many potential developers and projects, specifically data centers. But I'm here to reassure each and every one of you that this Ellis Group and Colivor is a team that is genuine and first class, that we don't see every day. There are people's people who care about our community and the people of Northern Nevada. And being fifth generation business, sixth generation Nevadan, that's very important. It's very refreshing to see that this Ellis team and Colivor team walk their talk. They don't talk the talk. They're true. They come with courtesy, they come with respect, showing true value with sincere investment, while aligning themselves with strong local contractors and tradespeople. They believe in local. They believe in the community. So it's few and far between, because like Doug said, in Story, there's a lot of contractors that come and go. And we live and breathe this city, and always have and always will. We don't go to Vegas. We do everything right here in Nevada, in Northern Nevada. So to end it and wrap up, I strongly believe that this web data center will be a win-win from the beginning to the end for our great city of Reno. There will be continued service, like the gentleman said earlier, for maintenance beyond the initial construction, which is a mechanical contractor, plumbing contractor. We would be involved, hopefully, not guaranteed, but honored and proud to be a part of it. So therefore, we support permanently high-skilled jobs right here in Reno, Nevada. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in the chambers wishing to speak under public comment? Seeing none, I'll ask, is there any comment on Zoom?
No one has their hand raised on Zoom. We did receive other correspondence that was forwarded to the Planning Commission and entered into the record.
Excellent. So I'll close the public comment and take commissioner disclosures, starting with Armstrong and Draculich.
Commissioner Draculich.
Go ahead. Go for it.
Read and received emails, spoke with the applicant's representative prior to the last meeting and also prior to this meeting, and am familiar with the site.
Commissioner Armstrong, I spoke with the applicant's representative prior to this meeting only. And those are my only disclosures.
My apologies. Commissioner Velto spoke with the applicant's representative as well as the applicant. Also read and received correspondence, including an email delivered to the city attorney, a letter delivered to the city attorney's office.
Commissioner Del Villar, similar to Commissioner Veltro over here.
Commissioner Villanueva, I reviewed the memo from Development Services Department. Someone reached out, one of the applicant's reps, I don't know who it was. We did not speak materially about the project, but that was a really brief conversation, and that's the extent of my disclosures.
Commissioner Becerra engaged with residents, engaged with City Council via a public comment letter for their December 11th, 2024 meeting, engaged with the applicant and Nevada Energy, visited the site, familiar with the site, and engaged with former council members that are familiar with the Sustainability Action Plan for the City of Reno.
Commissioner Rohrmeyer, familiar with the site, read comments, staff report and materials, and spoke with the applicant representative, NV Energy, and yep, I think that's where we are. I appreciate you coming back to us. I'll close the disclosures and open it up for questions from the commission. Who wants to start?
I can,
We'll start to my right.
okay, sorry. I have a couple of questions for a variety of folks. And I'm not sure who should actually address this, but it's concerns that I have with the ability of our public services, mostly Reno Fire, to potentially mitigate any fires that are there, but I'm more concerned with their ability to contain any chemical that they use in putting out. Hopefully there's not going to be a fire, but I just want to sort of get a better understanding of what the city of Reno has the capacity and capabilities of doing.
Jeff Foster, Associate Planner for the record. As a part of the standard review process for LDC cases, the fire department does have the opportunity to review each project, and provide comments. The fire department did provide comments on this application, but they centered around more access, site design, things like that. They did not bring up anything substantive or anything at all with regard to putting out fires or responding in a service time or anything like that. So we would then therefore treat it as they don't have any concerns.
Okay, yeah, because the one of the concerns I have is, again, because I'm assuming they're going to use some sort of foam to put out the electrical fire in a data center or something that potentially has toxins in it, or I'm not sure. But I'm concerned about it because if there isn't a containment plan, then is that potentially going to flow as part of the water detention that goes into Swan Lake? I don't know if anybody has the answer.
Mike Raley for the record. I don't have that specific answer, but I did want to also point out that in addition to the fire department review, our code sets essentially thresholds for hazardous materials and chemicals. This project does not meet those. If it did, it would require a supplemental review, a supplemental conditional use permit. So the fire department has reviewed that. They do not trip any of those thresholds. Also, this is within the appropriate response time for the fire department, and the building will be constructed to, we have adopted the International Fire Code, so it will be constructed to that.
Got it, thank you. I'll let others ask questions. I'm sure there's some more.
I'd be allowed to just provide an answer. So I just want to ask, we don't have any chemical fire suppression as part of the project.
Sorry, I meant the city of Reno, not you guys.
Okay.
All right, well, Commissioner Velto, you have a question?
Yeah. So I want to talk about energy, and I think these questions might be probably better suited for the applicant, I would guess. Is it Mr. I don't recall your name, I'm sorry. Mr. Rubinson. So I appreciated that your presentation tonight focused on the second half of the fourth finding for the conditional use permit. I think during our last discussion we had here, we really focused mostly on the first portion, which says public services and facilities available to serve the project. I think it was noted to me at least that you focused on the second half as well, which was that, or public services will be provided with the development. It's my understanding from your presentation that phase one of the project is already served by Peavine Bank 1, but phase 2 is dependent on Peavine Bank 2. Can you just explain kind of how you know that Peavine Bank 2 is going to be constructed and able to serve the project?
We've been negotiating an apparatus procurement agreement with NV Energy. They've said to us, Peavine Bank 2 is not needed for the community overall, but since you are asking to catalyze it, we need you to fund the procurement of the equipment and the construction of it. So we have an agreement that is literally ready to sign, and as soon as we finalize what we're doing here and go through a number of other parameters with our transmission line, it's about a mile-long line. There are a couple of civil-related components, and that's why it's pushed out until the middle of next year. So once we resolve those, we will sign the APA, write the check, and sign the line extension agreement. And then the equipment will be purchased by NV Energy. Takes several years to obtain, and then construction can commence. So they have come to us and said, if you want it, pay for it, we'll build it. And then over time, there'll be some measure of reimbursement as the power starts to get utilized. And that will actually create, half of the bank will actually be available for other users that come along. So we are actually catalyzing that additional capacity.
And I'm glad you mentioned that. So Peavine Bank 2 is not going to be used exclusively by this data center. There's some sort of positive benefit to the greater community by the construction of Peavine Bank 2 that otherwise would not be built. Is that fair?
That, I don't have the specifics of it, Matt. Is that half of it we're using? Is that roughly? Roughly, yes. Roughly half of what that bank will provide.
Great. Okay, that helps me a lot understand. And I just want to say I do appreciate the inclusion of that focus because I think that was probably left out of the first discussion we had. So I appreciate you bringing that up tonight and pointing that second half of the CUP finding that gives us another avenue to make that finding.
Thank you so much.
Questions to my left. We'll start with Commissioner.
For me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Question for staff. Okay, so I need a lot of these questions are just going to be allowing me to better understand the project, the development components of this. So there is nothing in the current development code providing for data centers, is that correct?
No, it was added in January of this year. There was, through an administrative interpretation, added the definition of data centers as well as two use-specific standards to RMC. And that is also now being formally adopted through the Title 18 zoning code update that's currently winding its way through the review process. So the admin interpretation effectively adds them to Title 18, and then they will formally be added to Title 18 through the zoning code cleanup.
How is that? If it's isn't it like an ordinance is effectively a legislative process through the city council, and so how can an administrative memo or administrative interpretation thereby make it law? And how does that work? I mean, where would I find that process in the law?
Mike?
I might defer this ultimately to legal, but the administrator has the ability to determine if there's a use that's not defined in the code, has the ability to make an interpretation of that use, and that's what occurred in this case. So we were getting multiple calls regarding data centers. It was not a defined use. We essentially we're categorizing them as warehousing prior to the admin interpretation. And so what we did is we researched what other jurisdictions, how they define them, and based our determination on that.
And that method that you guys use, where is that in statute or is that case law?
Carl, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's actually in Title 18.
Yeah, Development Services has the ability to define different uses, and they did that in this case, and it's going to be incorporated in Title 18, so.
So how do we really have any public comment or public say? How does the city council really get public comment with regard to new ordinances that are passed if an administrative interpretation is made and then thereby effectively adopted thereafter? I don't understand where there's the public input and public process in that. And so I guess that's where I'm confused. I don't understand how this is actually law in the development code. So that's my first concern. I don't really understand that. And then my next thing is, so mixed-use suburban, this is, I think the site is mixed-use suburban, is that right?
Correct.
And under the master plan, what is it zoned under the master plan?
The master plan land use designation is industrial.
Industrial, okay.
So if I may offer something there, the mixed-use suburban zone is a non-compatible zone under the master plan. So in theory, the applicant could have requested a zone change to industrial.
Okay.
But they didn't need to, so.
Because of this administrative interpretation?
Well, the administrative interpretation requires a conditional use permit for data centers in all zones, not just MS. So even if the zone had been changed to industrial or industrial commercial, which would be a conforming zone under the master plan designation, would still require a conditional use permit.
Okay, so what I'm really concerned about is just setting precedent before we even have anything really formal. So for example, if this is mixed-use suburban, I don't see anything in the master plan that allows for mixed-use suburban in an industrial zone. So I see what you're saying. You're basically saying they could have come in and asked for, to change the zoning to allow for it to be industrial. But I think that was not done because I think it is still unclear what is moving forward going to happen with this. And the way it stands today, they really didn't need to. If I'm understanding you correctly, that there was really no need for them to do that. So that's a concern for me. My concern is what's going to happen to the site moving forward? Are we really going to adopt this administrative interpretation as is, or are there going to be changes? Because the ordinance process can be a lengthy process, and obviously there's public input there. So that's a concern of mine. The other concern is non-conforming residential. You kept referring to non-conforming residential. What did you mean by that?
So let me just scan to the slide here. So these residential uses, these mobile home parks, are non-conforming in the sense that they are a residential use in a zone that does not allow residential uses. So they predated the zone, the current zoning. So they're non-conforming. In other words, they wouldn't be allowed to be built if they were proposed now in those zones. So they're non-conforming with the zoning that they are built upon.
Yeah, okay. That's what I thought you meant by that. So that was kind of the interesting thing, that I see this a lot, and I'm not talking at you, I'm just kind of thinking out loud, so excuse me. But I see this a lot with, because in this, is this the North Valley? Is it 4?
Yes.
4. Where there's a lot of different zone, because it feels like there's just mixed match of zoning. So these were in previously, what, do you happen to know what those were? They weren't industrial previously. What were they before? You probably don't know.
What was the zoning before?
Yeah.
I don't
You have
know.
no idea. But they're industrial now.
See, well, actually, you can see, so on this slide, you can see where those circles were.
Uh-huh.
They're zoned MS.
MS, okay.
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 But they're non-conforming in the sense of, here's the master plan for the entire area. You can see the entire area is master planned industrial.
Industrial, yeah.
So were those sites to be proposed to be redeveloped at some point in the future, they would need to be developed with something that conforms with the zoning and the master plan designation.
Okay. And last question, I apologize, this will be it, and then we can continue. This is another zoning question. So if we were, say we were to move forward and approve this application based on this administrative interpretation, which for this plot of land, which is MS, what could be the implications later for other areas in other parts of the city that are zoned MS? Because if the plan is to move this for this site to become industrial later on, and we approve it as is today with MS, what happens later in the other parts of the city that are zoned MS? Does that automatically mean that we can, we're kind of tying our hands into, kind of as far as precedent is concerned, tying our hands and obligated at that point to start approving these data centers in MS zones?
So, no. So again, so the administrative interpretation requires a conditional use permit for data centers in any zone that they're allowed in the administrative interpretation. So I don't remember all of them off the top of my head, but I know that IC, ME, mixed employment, MS, mixed use suburban, those are all zones that under the admin interpretation allow a data center with approval of a conditional use permit. So every conditional use permit that comes in is going to have to go through the CUP process. And that is also, that admin interp and the two standards, the use specific standards, the parking and the number of dock doors, those are also proposed to be added through the Title 18 zoning code cleanup. So to your question, if anywhere in the city, if a if a data center is proposed on a parcel that is zoned MS, it will be required to go through the CUP process, and that project would be evaluated on its own merits. It would by no means be an approved, a de facto approval of data centers on parcels zoned MS. Every one of them would have to be analyzed on their own merits, taken into context surrounding land uses, and the other things that we look at when we review entitlement applications.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Becerra.
No questions. Kidding. Sure. I want to kind of level set, though. I want to build upon Commissioner Velto, Del Villar, and Villanueva's line of questioning and just kind of bring it back for folks on the interwebs and anyone that needs to kind of recap this in the future. On 12.5, if we had taken a vote, from recollection, Commissioner Velto did the math, and it would have been a technical denial, more likely than not. We afforded the applicant a continuance in good faith to build upon this conversation and try to make findings around issues 4 or the findings for potentially 2 and 5 as well, around my concerns, also 4 with Commissioner Vermeer. So given that, and given actually what Commissioner Villanueva just mentioned, that this is an administrator interpretation, it compounds issues for us right now, especially since City Council has only approved the first reading of the ordinance, which is packaged with Title 18 cleanup changes. So we do have some challenges here, and I appreciate those lines of questions. So given that, I also want to say thank you to the applicant, Mr. Harvey, Nevada Energy and folks, for playing ball with us the last 48 hours and trying to work with us. So thank you for that. So there we go. First question is probably going to be to the applicant, Mr. Harvey.
Yeah, hi, David Hardy, Ellis Partners.
Hey, thank you so much. So thank you so much for your recent memo on trying to find alignment with our sustainability goals. 2 weeks ago, it seemed like it was not feasible to do solar, and now it is, which again, I'm all for. Could you explain to us why it's feasible now and why it wasn't before?
I stated at the last meeting that we didn't have a viable plan to provide solar. It had never been requested of us. It wasn't part of the requirement, so
Right.
It hadn't been studied. Providing solar on a facility like this is quite complex. given the kind of purpose-built systems and equipment that serve the facility in order for it to deploy the electricity, with maximum efficiency. So we spent the last 2 weeks working with engineers, vendors, and equipment suppliers to understand the opportunity and if it were viable. And so we're making some changes to the specifications of the equipment such that we can accommodate the solar system on the roof.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Chair, if I may have a follow-up with, I think this will be for Mr. Jeff, when you have a moment. Hey, Jeff. I was curious, you mentioned that this administrative interpretation came into play in January, and since then, perhaps there's been some outreach through staff to perhaps gather feedback from stakeholders. And I was curious how feedback since then from any stakeholder, whether residents or others, has been incorporated to strengthen this potential ordinance that will come before council. And I believe Commissioner Rohrmeyer shared some feedback during those public discussions, and probably more recent as well, to staff. Could you highlight how that feedback has made its way into the final ordinance being presented to council?
So you're talking about post the hearing 2 weeks ago?
I guess pre and post.
So I'm not involved with the Title 18 zoning code cleanup, so I wouldn't be able to give a qualified answer on what kind of outreach has been done vis-a-vis data centers in particular. I know that the zoning code cleanup, as you all are aware, has gone through a substantial public outreach process. But as to particular discussions on data centers and the like, I'm not aware.
Right, and I appreciate that. And I think Mike's going to probably tag team with you here. And I guess, I'll go ahead and let him speak.
Sure. Once again, Mike Riley for the record. So this admin interpretation, as Jeff mentioned, was made in January. That was then added in as part of the code cleanup. From that point on, that those edits were made. So there was still some public output or input during that, but to say it was specific to data centers, I can't speak to that. But when this was presented to City Council, Angela Foose, when in her presentation, was specifically referenced the data center addition. In case council had concerns or questions related to that, there was no significant discussion. Council did approve the zoning code cleanup. In fact, it goes back on January 8th for the second reading and will be finalized on January 8th.
Great, thank you, Mike. Quick follow-up on that. Since it's the first reading, to your words, there wasn't meaningful engagement from council, would it not be customary for there to be a mandatory language upon the final reading to accommodate feedback, whether from council or constituents?
I think that would probably be a better question for Mr. Hall.
Carl Hall, City Attorney. No, typically after the first reading, it's not amended. It won't be amended. And under Code 1808-502, the Development Services does have the approval to make administrative interpretations of this title, and it's on file with the clerk's office, and it's part of the code now. So it will be a second reading, but it's going to be the law. So.
Thank you, Carl. I'm going to yield some time here for my fellow commissioners, but I do have some others.
I wanted to ask a question following up on that. Because when the code cleanup was presented to us and data centers were included, I know I specifically gave public comment on, hey, we need to address things like the infrastructure, what's going to happen with things like overhead lines and substations when we review those projects. None of that feedback made it into the comments along with the data center. So I just wanted to find out what from the city was taken from those public comments around data centers, because none of that language ended up in the code cleanup.
I personally was not on the team that did the code cleanup, but I know that they had, I believe it was about 20 stakeholder meetings once with the addition of the data centers. They collected, dozens of comments and different input from different interests. I would have to talk to Angela and her team to see how all that was sorted through and incorporated.
Commissioner Velto, you have a question?
Yeah, I think my question is probably for you, Jeff, possibly Carl. Does an administrative interpretation need to be incorporated into code in order to carry the force of law?
The answer is no. We have, and we're in the process of looking up the code section, but this would feed back into Commissioner Villanueva's question on the ability of an admin interpretation to be issued under which we would be proceeding forth tonight. And there is a code section in Title 18 that does allow the administrator to issue administrative interpretations for uses that are not defined in the code currently. And I don't remember the rest of the language, and then we're hoping to find it. So
it's specifically section 1803-205, classification of new and unlisted uses.
So, and that's consistent with my understanding of how administrative interpretations work, is that administrative bodies that have the ability to interpret things are able to implement them or issue an interpretation, then that becomes effective with the law. Is it your understanding that the process of putting that administrative interpretation into the code is merely perfunctory as opposed to something that requires it to actually become effective as an administrative interpretation?
Sorry, are you asking it in terms of a public review process, or are you just asking?
I think I was kind of asking the same question two ways, to be totally candid, and I'm just getting out of a trial where I've been doing cross-examination for a couple of days, so I apologize if that's the style I'm going into. But the simplest sense, I'm hearing from my fellow commissioners that they are concerned that this administrative interpretation is not yet in code. My understanding is that that's not relevant to put the applicant on notice that this is what the rules are for developing in the city of Reno. Is that consistent with your understanding?
That is consistent with my understanding, that the administrative interpretation effectively added the use and the use-specific standards to code without officially being in Title 18, 100% printed, online, et cetera. So the administrative interpretation is effectively an accompanying document that we have many administrative interpretations on all sorts of things that eventually they because we don't update Title 18 on a daily or weekly or monthly basis, we have things that get us through until the next zoning code cleanup, i.e. where we're at now, that address issues that are either holes in the code or to this one was a use that was not in the use table. Mike, do you want to finish reading the?
Yeah, and hopefully this is clarifying and doesn't muddy the waters, but had this project been submitted in December of last year, we would be here tonight reviewing a CUP for 24-hour operations for a warehouse. We would have considered it to be a warehouse.
And I guess I want to understand kind of what the applicant was expecting when they applied, because there's been a line of questioning that really gets to this issue of precedence, and I question whether or not we ever have precedence because we're kind of an administrative body that makes decisions on a application by application basis. But assuming there is some concept of precedence that we as commissioners are supposed to apply, are you aware of any instances where an applicant has applied when there's an administrative interpretation expressly allowing their use, and then the Planning Commission has decided that that interpretation does not have enough information, so we're going to deny the use, or that interpretation is not in code, so we're going to deny the use? Because I'm personally more concerned about that precedential effect of possibly limiting our ability to comply with our code that says administrative interpretations can work and be done. So are you aware of any instances where that has happened, where the Planning Commission has said, we're going to ignore this administrative interpretation. This isn't good enough.
I am not, but I don't have the depth of history that might be able to speak to that. It may have happened, it may not have. I don't know. Mike, can we read the administrative? I'm sorry, the 1803-205 section.
I've got it. So under 1803-205, classification of new and unlisted uses, the following procedure shall apply if an application is submitted for a use category or use type that is not specifically listed in Table 3-1. Table of allowed uses. Submission and approval of such an application shall be required prior to approval of any other permit or development approval associated with the use. A, administrator determination of appropriate use category and use type. The administrator shall determine the appropriate use category and use type for the proposed use, and making such determination, the administrator shall consider the potential impacts of the proposed use, including the nature of the use and whether it includes dwelling, cells, processing, or storage, and typical operations, employment characteristics, nuisances, requirements for public utilities, and transportation requirements. B, establish use-specific standards if necessary. When establishing a use category and specific use type, the administrator shall determine whether additional use-specific standards are necessary to reduce potential impacts to surrounding properties or the community. C, uses requiring a code text amendment in deciding a new or unlisted use. The administrator may determine that such new or unlisted use requires a text amendment of this title. A text amendment to this title shall follow the procedure in Section 1808-501, Code Text Amendment. Appeal of administrator's determination. An appeal of the administrator's determination may be made pursuant to the procedures in subsection 1808.307J, an appeal. And there's been no appeal.
Can I follow up on that? So what I just heard from City Attorney's Office is that there is an appeal process if anyone wanted to challenge this administrative interpretation. Have you even heard of anyone trying to challenge this administrative interpretation?
I have not.
May I ask who would be notified on such administrative on an administrative decision like this? There's no 750-foot applicant parcel?
No, we do not send it out. So, because it applies across the entire city, so it's not like we would send a 750-foot notice from this particular site. When we looked at that admin interpretation, for example, like I mentioned previously, a warehouse is permitted by right in this zone. We added the requirement for a conditional use permit just based on their operational characteristics and what other jurisdictions had done. Most notably, that we know it would be operating 24 hours, which would normally trigger a conditional use permit regardless. So, as I mentioned, had this come in last year, Jeff would be making a very similar presentation to what is tonight. We would have just classified this as a warehouse that was functioning as a data center, but it would have triggered a conditional use permit for the 24-hour operation.
I think if you'll entertain one more question along these lines, if it wasn't publicly noticed, and then an administrator makes a decision but does not adequately consider things such as the actual type of use or the public utilities, and no use-specific standards were applied, or were there use-specific standards? It seems that there aren't, and that the issue outside of this applicant is that we're asking the city to make use-specific recommendations through the code cleanup process, and that hasn't been entertained or considered.
Jeff Foster, Associate Planner for the record. So there are two use-specific standards that I referred to in the last two bullets on this slide. I don't have the full copy of the administrative interpretation with me, but effectively the data center use was recognized as being closest to a warehouse or distribution center, and therefore the two standards, well, one standard is directly ties to warehouse or distribution center. That's the one parking space per 3,300 square feet. The only other use-specific standard that was applied that is unique to the data center use is the limitation on the number of dock doors. Since data data centers don't need a bunch of truck docks. So as opposed to a traditional warehouse or distribution center. So there were use-specific standards applied in the administrative interpretation for data centers.
I think I'll pass questions to Sylvia, Commissioner Villanueva.
So, clarifying question. So there's this issue that's in front of us between the administrator, and then the board. And I mean, if this is a decision that generally can be made by the administrator, why is it, I mean, I get it, we're here for the CUP, but this is a land use board, and we're here to question an application's appropriate land use. So, I mean, as a lawyer myself, I would look at this and I would say, there's a board and an administrator, and the board disagrees with the administrator. The board, from a regulatory perspective, is typically the deciding factor, not the administrator. That's in regulatory bodies, quasi-judicial bodies, that's generally the case. So that's kind of my position here, is this is a matter that's in front of the board. Why would we defer to administrative interpretation when we have the body here in front of us looking at the application and essentially saying, we're making the interpretation, not the administrator. And so in your mind, is that in your, history of working with the city and government agencies and a body like this, isn't that typically how things are handled? You come to the body to make interpretation decisions?
If I can cut in here, we're not debating whether or not the administrator has the ability to define what a data center is. They've done that. They have that ability to do that. And so they define what the use is. And the question is this an appropriate place for this use to go? So I'm directing you to please look at the findings that you're required to look at under the conditional use permit and make a decision based on those findings and not get talking about things that aren't connected to those findings.
Commissioner Becerra. Thank
you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Hall, Commissioner Villanueva, and folks. I do want to state that this is good, healthy discussion. I do want to point out that between now and the final reading, even post-reading, under Reno Charter, Section 7A185, there is ample room to amend these ordinances. I'll just have that for the record. I am focused on findings number 2, 4, 5. 4 seems like we've made good headway, so I'll put less focus on that right now, but focus on 2 and 5. Jeff, without tools like scorecards or rubrics, how does staff evaluate whether a data center aligns with community priorities and goals? Again, tying it to 2 and 5.
So I don't have the findings memorized. What does finding number 2 say?
Sure. It is compatibility with surrounding development and reasonable compatibility with surrounding uses.
Okay. So I believe that's the second one in my chart here. Land use and project design are compatible with surrounding development. Is that fair? Is that
correct?
Okay. All right. So my characterization is that this use is that the area that the site is generally surrounded by other industrial level uses or industrial types of uses, and that the condition number 5 does limit the allowed hours for business vehicle activity, which is tied to those non-conforming residential uses that are relatively close. So essentially it's an industrial area. This is an industrial use that is a low impact use that doesn't have, that's not going to cause issues with the surrounding development, even the residential uses that are relatively close, and therefore staff could make that finding.
Correct. And part of my question, though, was, well, maybe a follow-up question. Would staff be amenable to using some level of scorecard on top of a checklist to help evaluate data centers moving forward? Because there is a couple more before us, and we don't want to play whack-a-mole about the sustainability or outlets or whatever else, right? And so what we owe applicants is predictability, and we owe our residents that. And And so I'm just curious if there are tools or such as scorecards that staff would be amenable to adopting or considering, perhaps even bringing forth to council to consider. That way there's some level of predictability moving forward in 2025, because what I've seen is the applicants and anyone else, they're willing to play ball, but they just need to know where, where the hoop is at or where the bar is at.
So I appreciate the question, and tying back into the earlier part of your question, sorry that I didn't answer that in terms of the rubric or the scorecard. At the end of the day, there is no scorecard or rubric for any land use in the city of Reno in terms of, a checklist and, some kind of grades or anything like that. It's up to staff to look at the application, the findings, and are they met on balance or not? Sometimes we can make some of the findings, but not all of the findings. But would I be open to a rubric? Sure, if it's a process that is established, but it's not established, not just for this use, for any use. We don't have such a scorecard or a rubric by which we, judge the findings.
Thanks, Jeff. And let me rephrase as one follow-up, and I'll pass the baton, is in your sane world, do you want to do the same dance 2 weeks from now?
No.
Precisely. Okay. And that's where standards or some level of predictability comes into play that I'm asking for.
I think we should open up questions for Commissioners Draculich and Armstrong, who are joining us online.
I don't actually have any questions. I'll just kind of reserve for discussion whenever we get there, but thank you.
Commissioner Draculich, yeah, same thing. I'm prepared to have a good lengthy discussion. I thought the applicants solved a lot of problems from the previous meeting. I don't have any further questions for them or staff at the moment.
Very good. Commissioner Velto, did I see you have your hand? Notion?
I would suggest we move into discussion. It seems like that would be my suggestion. Obviously, my commissioner to my left might have more questions, so I don't want to intrude on that.
I have one more.
Thank you. This is for the applicants. One of you guys. Whichever one is brave enough. No, I'm just kidding. You guys talk a lot in your presentation about the standards of the Santa Clara data center and how it's won a bunch of awards. And I'm just wondering how that data center compares to the data center that would be built for the web data center.
It is substantially similar in design. It is a smaller facility, but substantially similar in how it operates. Santa Clara has a different climate. It's also at a different elevation than Reno is. So the mechanical equipment that the specific specifications on the mechanical equipment might be different. But as far as the operation of the facility and the customer base of the facility is substantially similar.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. This is for the applicant. Thank you. So as you know, I was not present at the last meeting, so you'll have to forgive me if this is a question that was previously answered. Regarding the sewer capacity, can you talk a little bit about that for me? Because I see in the packet that the Reno Stead, what does it say? That sewer plant is nearing capacity. So what's the situation there, and how is the applicant dealing with that? Is there even sewage at the site? I'm not sure how these sites work. Yeah.
Yeah, I might call on Tectonics Group to answer more specific technical questions, but this use has, particularly compared to other industrial uses, there's no significant, sewage creation other than the, toilet facilities and kitchen facilities kitchenette facilities that serve the operators.
Okay. Okay, so this operation, and again, you also have to forgive me because I don't know a lot about data centers in general. So some of these questions just come from my ignorance with respect to data centers. This is the land use board, so I was asking land use questions, as those are within my purview. But if you want to answer the sewage
Yeah, if I may,
question.
Commissioner Villanueva, I'd like to chime in, and I'd also like to invite John Browning from Tectonics up here to provide a little bit more information on the Reno Stead facility. But I would point out that condition number 2, the standard timeframe for requirement in code for applying for a building permit is 18 months. However, in the geographic area that we're talking about, because of the uncertainty of wastewater and the ability to be served in that area, we typically extend the condition, the building permit application timeframe out. And you'll see that in condition number 2, it's been extended to 36 months. Effectively, what we're doing is we're recognizing that it would be appropriate for the applicant to be afforded more time to apply for a building permit because of the uncertainty of the wastewater situation in that area. So,
What type of wastewater is it? What kind of sewage are we talking here? Is it, like he said, restrooms, just restrooms, or?
yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And then, again, this next question stems from my ignorance on data centers. What's the water consumption that we're thinking with these? I have all these, ideas in my head. I don't really know if they're true. Are these, there's cooling happening from water? Are we, are any of these, are there machines that need to be cooled with water? Is any of that happening?
Yeah, I'll take that one. I just finished managing the construction of their Santa Clara facility, so I'm a little more familiar with it. They use an air-cooled chiller system, which fills, basically the loop of the chiller is filled upon initiation, and then there is no more additional water use for the life of the facility, other than during maintenance periods where they're gonna drain it and refill it. So different than water-cooled chillers, this uses almost no water for the operation. And the water is, as Dave mentioned, for the kitchenette and the bathrooms.
Okay,
And
so it's
sewage
just-
is generated from the kitchenette and the bathrooms for these 17 employees. So very, very minimal water or wastewater usage compared to
Okay.
other data centers even.
Okay, and then last question, if I may. Another question stemming from my ignorance. With regard to, is there any health effect from these things? I'm not familiar with this type of technology and necessarily how they work. Do those around in the surrounding neighborhoods need to be concerned about toxic impact or anything like that from, I don't know, you hear, you read stories with like AirPods and things like that causing issues with the body. Is there anything like that we need to be concerned about?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a follow-up question, maybe more, just want to see which one for Mr. Jeff here that I had. Just a quick one, Jeff, and then happy to go into discussion when everyone else is. But I was just curious if, since there is a lot of talk around sustainability and trying to make the findings, 245 and so forth, has the Office of Sustainability for the City of Reno chimed in, and if so, in what ways, to help kind of strengthen that administrative interpretation and projects moving forward, since we can all agree that we don't want to do this dance all the time?
Right, so one of our principal planner actually reached out to the head person over there, and she was interested in engaging the topic kind of at a broader level, not specific to this project.
Correct, yeah, broader.
But at a broader level, she provided some insight on data centers in terms of energy use and water usage and some of the things that we've been talking about here tonight. So, certainly I think that office would be interested in participating in a broader discussion of data centers, their impacts, how they might be evaluated moving forward with other cases that might come in under, in the future.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jeff. And kind of with that, I do want to just say that, and you're good, Jeff. This body has gone against staff recommendation in the past, and City Council has upheld our decision, which goes against staff recommendation. And it's not just to say no, it's just to strengthen projects because everyone has a path forward, right? I think from the slides, our applicant before us had a slide that took into account a potential appeal timeline. So I do just want to say that, and I want to say thank you again for being good partners with us in trying to strengthen not just this project, but all projects moving forward. I think in our candid conversations, the applicant knew that there's two sides to being the first. There's gloating rights, and you're going to go through the unofficial Reno rodeo. Yeah.
I have two quick questions for the applicant. Anyone will do. I heard that there's 40,000 square feet of new solar proposed on the roof? 4,000 square feet. Okay, that's a difference. Can you tell me how much generation it is and kind of what that would energize in the office place?
We'll let Dave take that one. We have sort of different slices here. You want to reach out to a friend or?
The exact output of that 4,000 square feet would be, I think, somewhere in the range of like 250 kilowatt system. But the exact output really depends on a lot of factors. I think, as you know, orientation and location. So I don't have an exact figure for you.
Okay, no, I appreciate the details. And also just one other quick question while you're there. It was mentioned, I believe, that the infrastructure or the equipment inside gets replaced on an average of 3 to 5 years. Is that correct?
The network equipment and the server equipment, yes, that's sort of the typical lifespan before computer equipment and chips reach obsolescence.
And is there with Colivor, or do they have an agreement in place for like e-waste recycling? Do they have some sort of end-of-life plan for, it's quite a lot of electric equipment? Just curious.
I can't speak to that exactly, but they would be following any local requirements and ordinances associated with that. And due to the value of even at the time of obsolescence, due to the value, I can pretty confidently say that it would be recycled and not put in the trash like a AA battery.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff, do you happen to know, does the city have a requirement for e-waste recycling?
Yeah, I'm not specifically aware on that.
Okay, thank you. Well, does anybody have any remaining questions? All right, well, it looks like we're ready for discussion. We've already done public comment, so I will open it to the commissioners for discussion. Who would like to begin? Commissioner Velto.
Last meeting we had, we really focused on, seemed like the energy availability under number 4 in the CUP findings. It was my impression leaving that meeting that a lot of the issues that maybe some of the commissioners had were focused on that finding. I think the applicant has largely substantiated their ability to comply with that finding. Not only with the fact that there will be energy due to a will serve letter, but with their contribution to creating new energy production through a facility. Aside from that, since that time, we've also received a letter that disputes, in general, the Planning Commission's ability to oversee this. I don't necessarily know if we need to take that into account, though I think it's persuasively done and something we should probably consider. I think we can overwhelmingly say that there is energy for this project. NV Energy is here, is present. I know has met with multiple commissioners and have confirmed that they'll be able to provide power. So in my view, finding number 4 under the CUP findings is quite clear that that is satisfied. You know, we've kind of focused on issues that are distinct from what we talked about last time. And I'm very concerned that we're kind of moving the goalpost for an applicant that is trying as hard as they can to try to get a project done. And the remaining findings I don't think are really in dispute. I mean, we talk about compatibility. This is a warehouse next to a warehouse, and the type of activity within the warehouse doesn't cause negative externalities around the warehouse in a way that is distinct from those that are right next to it. So if we're talking about compatibility with the surrounding area, I think that finding is fairly easy to make in my mind. And I would hope that we don't create such high hurdles for future projects by trying to say that we don't have enough policy or enough structure or guidance when this is an allowed use that's legally implemented by an administrative interpretation that is done consistent with Title 18 and the master and code. Which, so I think we asked a lot of questions tonight about different issues, but I struggle to see how the applicant hasn't really met the very high metric we've already set forth at the last meeting. I think they've far exceeded it. And I would hate for this to have been a waste for them to have to go through the process. I understand we want to vet projects, and this is a new kind of concept to our city, and we want to thoroughly vet them. I think they've done the work, though, to show that they meet the findings, so that we can meet the findings based on what they've presented. And I don't want to do this to applicants in the future that work so hard, especially when I think that the evidence is there for us to make all these findings.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to just maybe piggyback off that since my comments are related. Yeah, I'm very concerned about the direction that we're kind of taking this project. And I had mentioned this in the last meeting, and since this is my final meeting on the commission, I guess I just kind of want to make my thoughts very clear. Like, I just find it problematic that we are potentially overreaching. I think the condition related to the solar being added is an overreach by us, especially when you consider the fact that NV Energy, in conjunction with the applicant, was able to definitively demonstrate that there is sufficient power to make the finding. I don't understand. Look, I'm not going to obstruct. I think if it's a commercial point and folks are aligned on it, that's fine. I'm happy to support it. But I just want to make it clear, I find it problematic that we would, potentially set precedent for this kind of ask. I don't think it's consistent, and I think this sort of ask can just change depending on who is on the commission at any particular time. And I just think it's easier and better for us to kind of stay in our lane a little bit. And so I'm happy with how it's presented, but I just want to make it clear that I have concerns about kind of the path that we're going down on here. And I don't think we need additional caveats or information to make the findings. I think that's been very clearly demonstrated. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Drakovich, I'll chime in if that's okay, Vice Chair.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I'm with Commissioner Armstrong and Belto on both their points. I definitely left that last meeting thinking finding 4 was one of the main issues. I was ready to support it from what they had, but in talking to the applicant and then knowing they met with fellow commissioners at length to get us to that solar stage and get an understanding of the power situation. So I can definitely meet finding 4. I definitely don't have any concerns with 2 or 5. 5, I feel like staff has done a good job with the recommendations, recommended conditions of approval. And I guess I'm just having trouble wondering why our commission is leaving just the simple task of reviewing a CUP. And when we get to item 2, talking about, this development standards here, they were set in January. And this applicant put in an application with those standards in place. And I really feel like they've fulfilled their duty here. I do want to say thank you to Commissioner Becerra for what a great letter. Like I'll tell you right now, I read it twice, and you took action after that meeting. You truly are sincere and a solid commissioner. I thought Ms. Foos answered some of the questions. Maybe we could have more from her on that, but I do feel like, the public has had some level of input, and I think this conversation tonight should carry forward to the council and more public input. But for this, CUP in front of us, I support it wholeheartedly because they've done what they've been asked to do. And to Commissioner Becerra's letter, I think a denial of this project is almost a figurative moratorium. And as you proposed, you want it for 6 months. I'm just not comfortable with that at all, especially coming from this body. And I don't think they should have to suffer, this kind of push around there. So anyway, I appreciate the conversation. I'm listening intently. I'm in full support of this project, and I hope the rest of my fellow commissioners too, because so these folks can put together a great project that means a lot to this community. The data they brought forth as well with the impact financially, the companies that are coming here who need a data center to exist has a major financial impact to this community. And even to Commissioner Del Villar's concerns from the previous meeting, yes, there's not a lot of employees at this data center, but God, the amount of jobs that people from Ward 4 might have access to because of the companies that come here. I would imagine there's some level of ripple effect we should all consider on that for the whole community. So thank you for your time. I'm in full support of this project. Thank you.
Commissioner Del Villar.
Thank you. And thank you, fellow commissioners. As everybody has said here, we're all listening intently and trying to wrap our head around it. I just want to be clear, my concerns haven't changed. So the things that we're addressing were concerns that I had last week as well. We talk about, depending on who's on the commission, it could go either way. And I think that's what we're trying to mitigate, is not having that, by having clear policies in place and criteria and understanding. At least that's where I'm going. My big concern is that, I feel like we're setting the bar low by not having some requirements in place. And then it would just be easy for sort of just, and again, the applicant has done an amazing job, with the first presentation and then addressing some of the concerns that we have. But my concerns are still for, the safety of the residents in the area, the compatibility with this surrounding area, and the fact that we talked about energy a lot, but it's still, and yes, everybody's here, but there's still nothing signed potentially for that second bank until June. So I still have some concerns with that.
Commissioner Villanueva.
My primary concerns have nothing to do with the application itself. It's with the land use issues. I don't feel like I can make any of the findings because I don't feel like I have the appropriate, I think this is premature. And I'm of the position that how can I look at this application and determine whether or not this is the appropriate place for it if nothing's actually in the development code? We're looking at an administrative interpretation that may change, may not change. I don't know what's going to be adopted, and maybe this does need to just be stayed until after it is adopted. But the way I'm looking at this now, how can I make a decision? I'm concerned about what this could mean moving forward for other data center applications. Again, has nothing to do with the fact that it's a data center, has nothing to do with the applicant himself. This is strictly a land use concern that I have. I think this is a premature application given the circumstances. We're in the interim of about to adopt a development code, some changes to the development code, which I only learned about the data center changes a couple weeks ago. And when those were raised at that meeting, if we all look back at the meeting, I had a number of questions, and I was under the impression we were going to have some more of an opportunity to kind of vet that. It's probably fine. I don't know. I just don't feel like I can make the findings because I think it's premature, and I don't think we have the information available in the code to be able to make these findings.
Which finding can't you make?
Compatibility.
On what
compatibility
basis?
with surrounding uses. Specifically, this is an MS zone space, mixed-use suburban.
It's
Who's
not,
that?
though.
Who's speaking?
I am, sorry.
Oh, you.
Yeah, but this is the master plan zones, or says.
Industrial.
This is industrial, so it's.
Correct. Mixed-use suburban is not permitted under the max, at least from what I'm seeing here. I'm looking at the master plan right now, and I see industrial, commercial, mixed-use airport, mixed employment, parkways, greenways, and open space, planned unit development, and specific plan district. Those are the 7 that are permitted in industrial. This is not permitted based on what's presented now, but maybe that's going to change. I don't know.
Jeff, do you want to address that?
Jeff Foster, Associate Planner for the record. So just because an existing zoning district does not conform with the master plan does not mean that we cannot evaluate uses proposed in that district, whether or not it would go straight to a building permit, for example, or whether it requires some kind of a staff level review or review at the planning commission. So even though MS is not conforming with the industrial master plan designation, does not mean that an applicant cannot come forward with an application that is allowed in that zone, MS, as long as it meets the development standards and has the opportunity to be reviewed by this body.
So what zone in the development code, and maybe I just need some more information. What in the development code, where are data centers permitted currently? That's why I keep ending up in this circle.
So they're not, because again, they're not in the development code currently. So because they're recognized as being very similar to a warehouse or distribution center, they were then positioned as being allowed within the same zones that would allow a warehouse or distribution center, with the caveat that they weren't allowed by right. They were required to come forward to this body through a conditional use permit process.
Well, see, and this is the concern, that we're in this cyclical situation where it's like, well, they're not, but then you can consider it under industrial. But then we're looking at, all I'm asking is that maybe we have some firmer policies that I can actually analyze this and actually give the applicant what they need, which is a decision here. That's all I'm asking. So it's premature. I can't make the findings because I don't believe that the information is here and available for me to be able to make the findings. If maybe in 5 weeks I can make the findings, maybe we can continue this until then. But that's kind of the situation I'm dealing with right now.
Commissioner, I think.
Jeff, I think we may have discussed this at the last meeting, and apologies, it may have even come up again this meeting, but if we didn't have this data center carve out, so to speak, and this type of project came through, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, it would just be kind of viewed under the industrial lens, right? Like, there would still be a path forward for this project irrespective of what we're talking about, and we would be able to make findings, right? I mean, I just feel this is very circular, and I feel like we've covered this point a few times, but I don't understand the pushback.
Chair.
And I don't remember, Mike, you might have been the one who brought it up last time or this time, I don't recall, but a data center prior to January of this year would have been analyzed as a warehouse or distribution center. For a zone that allows warehouse and distribution centers by right.
I get that, but the circumstances have changed.
Can I actually jump in here? I think I'm hearing a different concern. I think the concern I'm hearing is that there is not like additional development standards or policies that are in place that allow you to evaluate whether or not you can make the findings. I think the difficulty with that position is, even if City Council were tomorrow by fiat to implement a bunch of development standards for data centers, they could not legally apply to this application because this application was submitted beforehand. So it's as if the law changed, and you had a, right now there's a civil claim that, and I'm talking like a lawyer because I know you're a lawyer and we speak like this, right? But there's a civil claim right now for conversion, and you file your lawsuit, and then the legislature gets rid of the civil claim for conversion. Your lawsuit doesn't get kicked out because they're not retroactively effective. So this applicant comes to us and submits their application at a point in time with what is permitted by the code. Any additional changes to code later on or implementation of policies, whatever you want to call it, cannot retroactively apply to them because they've already submitted. So for us to deny their application on that basis, I see it as akin to like a regulatory taking. Like we're taking away a right they have under the law, saying that, well, we want to change the law and want to retroactively apply it to you. It's just not legal. We can't do that. So I think the concern to say that, well, we don't have enough requirements, we can never have more requirements and apply to this application legally. Like we're stuck with what it is. Right now, we're just looking at CUP findings and whether the administrative interpretation is consistent with the Title 18, which it is. We're told that legally, as a matter of law, that's Title 18, it's allowed to do it. So it's an allowed use, and we look at the CUP findings, and that's where I kind of struggle with that explanation is we can't, like, the city's lack of preparedness cannot be a detriment to the applicant when they applied with that lack of preparedness by the city. Like, call it whatever you want, but that's how I view this, and we can't change the rules after they apply.
When did the application come forward?
I don't remember the exact date, but within the last month and a half or so. October. Okay, thank you.
October 24? 2024?
So what I was starting to say, though, if I may, Anthony, I think it was Commissioner Armstrong who asked the question. Before the admin interpretation, if a data center had been submitted, we don't get to just say, hey, look, we don't have a use in code that use lines up with. So our practice was to look at them as warehouse and distribution centers, okay? So, however, recognizing that was probably not the best course of action, we decided to add via administrative interpretation the ability to look at data centers as a specific use within Title 18 with 2 use-specific standards that were included in the administrative interpretation and that were referenced in my presentation. So I think we are at a much different place now than we would have been before January of this year, because now we at least have the opportunity to bring a data center to this very body to deliberate on its acceptability based on the findings for a conditional use permit. So we're actually a lot further along than we were before January of this year in terms of how the city treated data centers. If I may also, I would just like to point out that 2 weeks ago, we were before this body, and I know Commissioner Villanueva, you were not here to chime in at that point, but I left that meeting as the planner representing this project on the behalf of the city with an understanding that this body was concerned about a few key issues, namely the ability to supply energy, which is outside of my purview as staff to analyze. However, the applicant, through meeting with you folks and having NV Energy and address that issue, has, in my mind, substantially addressed that issue. And my recollection is that the question was asked if the ability to demonstrate that NV Energy can supply this project, would that resolve the concerns of this body that some of the folks had? And the answer was effectively yes. So I kind of feel like, we were led to move, to continue to address that issue, and then a whole host of new things is being brought up today that, from my point as staff, that's just doesn't seem like the right thing to do. So anyway, for what it's worth.
I have one question, and I know we're in discussion, so this is, I just didn't get a chance to ask this. The 24-hour operation, what is that for then? The 24-hour operations, what's that needed for? What kind of work will be done during the 24-hour?
So data centers run 24/7, 365.
Okay.
And so they have people that will be there overnight, security and people that, and they can obviously answer that question more specifically, but because the operation does actually run around the clock, that requires that 24-hour conditional use permit.
Okay, just because someone will be present, okay.
Sure, thanks. Thanks, commissioners. Again, really appreciate everyone being here. Just would like to remind folks that if we did take a vote a couple of weeks ago, again, they would be on an appeal trajectory based on a technical denial. We're here in good faith to try to strengthen this project and all projects moving forward. Because we did not actually take a vote, I think it's all fair game, right? We get new information, we get to evaluate that information. And I was at the December 11th City Council meeting, and I heard Mayor Shivi explicitly state that, we need to keep in mind the residents of Reno when making these critical decisions. And as others know, that's what I do first and foremost. And that's an area that I do agree with the mayor, especially in absence of, call it a scorecard, a rubric, or policies, but any level of standards that we can go off of to offer folks predictability. I do think that we need more ownership from our city council on as far as direction goes. And I think that's what an appeal pathway offers to both the applicant and the body, in this case us, that evaluates such decisions or projects. I do believe that data centers are inevitable, and I've said it before a couple of weeks ago that ironically we're all here because of data centers, right? People on the interwebs are listening to us because of data centers. We're able to do everything. But this is a new land use, and it's not just a, hey, come and play ball. It's what are your impacts and what are the outcomes to residents now and into the future? I'm a lifelong Northern Nevadan. I've seen this city grow since I was a little kid, and I've had conversations outside of my role and scope from executives at legacy companies here and small tell me, what were they thinking back then? And there's always going to be some level of that, but I think that that's also a good call for evaluating these new major land uses to try to get it as best as possible. Not perfect, but just towards excellence. And right now, I think that while I appreciate what the applicant has done in the last 48 hours, I think that we on the city side need to get our ducks lined up in a row. And it doesn't need to be a 6-month necessarily moratorium. That's aspirational. I would love, but I do believe that we could be nimble and get something before city council if this body decides to continue with the 12-5 trajectory of a denial and get further direction that's sound and offers folks in the future, some predictability and nimbleness for us as well. And I do think that it's interesting that there's talk about setting precedent, but then another commissioner will say, well, we don't really do precedent, so we can't even agree on that. So with that, I respectfully will be a no, but again, appreciate the applicant and their work. Oh, and I do have written remarks of what I just said anyways that I will submit for the record as well.
Well, it comes down to one. No, I think we know we're at a 3-3 here, and then it will come down to one vote. And I'll tell you, we've made a lot of progress in 2 weeks. We did. We absolutely did. We've now identified a process by which information can come from NV Energy and produce timelines that correspond to building permits and construction schedules. I think that that is the kind of information that I left the last meeting, that's what I asked for. I asked for information about the assurance from the Nevada Energy to be able to provide for the project. Other commissioners asked for more broad sweeping sustainability issues to be addressed. And I give the applicant kudos for coming to the table in the last 48 hours with additional solar opportunities and some other sustainability measures. So I appreciate those things. This is quite a challenge. We've also worked with staff and found that we can work with the Regional Planning Authority and look at whether these are projects of regional significance. Now, it would apply to projects beyond this, but those are ways that there can be more conformance review. So I am disappointed that the city did not create use-specific standards. That's not the applicant's fault. That is really a failure to recognize that data centers are a distinct use from other uses. They are not warehouses. And I keep getting mixed signals because we're not supposed to consider the past, but then we're supposed to consider the past. These are not warehouses. They might look like it from the outside, but they're intense energy users. And that is unlike other uses in the city of Reno. So while we've come a long way, I would love to see City Council weigh in on this, but I don't want to do it at the expense of your project. That's the challenge. I want City Council to act. I want direction, and I want them to step up to the plate that sustainability is important to the city of Reno, and that a hyperscale project is coming and a smaller scale boutique data center is coming right after this project. At what point are we going to recognize that there's been 2 fires in our city, that we're one of 5 top urban heat effect places, 2 of which are in Nevada in the United States, and that these things matter. And this is going to be largely driven by fossil fuels. Your data center is going to be run on fossil fuels until 2050, when there's 100% portfolio standard for renewables. And it puts a lot of pressure on rural communities in our state. It requires big transmission upgrades that all customers are paying for. And those are realities of this. So I do, I applaud Commissioner Velto for making a strong case of we do have to consider what is in front of us today under the standards that are here. But I guarantee you that we should all be advocating to our council members that this needs to be addressed in a different context because there's nothing else like it. And that is my final thoughts on this. I think we're going to have to do a roll call vote.
Before we do that, this is Carl from the City Attorney's Office. What I'm perceiving is there are no votes, but I haven't heard anybody articulate the findings that are required to be made to object to this with any specificity. For example, is the proposed location in accordance with the objectives of this title and the purpose of the zoning district which it's located? Haven't heard anybody address that. The proposed land use project is compatible with surrounding development. Nobody's talked about that or made any record that is defensible. Further, the proposed land use and project design is consistent with applicable development standards. Haven't heard anybody discuss that in any meaningful manner that I can defend. The characteristics and use of the proposed, as proposed, and as may be conditioned, are reasonably compatible with the types of uses permitted in the surrounding area. Haven't heard anybody address that, which is another finding that needs to be articulated. If you can't make that finding, then it needs to be on the record to be defensible. I can go on with each of the findings here. So if you want to vote no, I would ask that you supplement the record with some reasons based upon the findings that you're required to make or not able to make, and articulate why you can't make those particular findings.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. I'm really, really pleased that you walked through that, because I think it's important to remind this body that if we can't make findings, we do have to articulate within the legal kind of parameters that you've outlined, specifically why we can't make those findings. It's the same as asserting that you can make a finding. You don't just get to say no and be normative. I think it's a really important point. And it's again, it's my last meeting, so I guess take it with a grain of salt. But I really behoove this body to take to heart what the city attorney just laid forward. If you cannot justify a direct and straightforward reason that would hold up to a legal standard as to why you cannot support this project, then I think that is problematic. Thank you.
Commissioner Draculich, piggyback that. I don't know if they're going to appeal if they get denied, but if they do, we're talking about taxpayer money, staff time. Those things always concern me. I don't know what those really look like. But in this scenario, I don't understand how this isn't a home run and how they haven't done the best they could with what's in front of them. So if someone is, thinking of a no, I would like to hear what finding that can't make, because I kind of haven't heard it either. So I appreciate Mr. Hall bringing that up as well. Thank you.
Commissioner Valter here. I'm not going to reiterate the points. I too am very concerned about the prospect of future litigation against the city if we can't articulate the rationale for voting no. Yeah.
Great. Commissioner Becerra, for the record, if I may, Chair. Yeah, I think I mentioned it, and I think this is just going to be one of those things we agree to disagree, and not just to say that as a cop-out, but because, again, the point is that we don't have any kind of guidelines or standards by which to begin at a baseline altogether, right? And so again, for the record, I can't make findings 2, 5, compatibility with surrounding development, reasonable compatibility with surrounding uses. I'll submit this for the record in writing, so it's there. I do also want to ask, just for transparency, I did, because it's happened a few times, and each time it's happened, it seems like we've had our respectful counsel chime in, and I think it's worth noting what the conversation between Mr. Thornley and Mr. Hall was that led to those conversations. And it's out of respect, too. It's not adversarial in any way. I'm just curious. Thank you, Mr. Thornley.
Of course. I'm Doug Thornley, law firm of Holland and Hart, on behalf of the applicant. So my conversation with the city attorney is, respectfully, Commissioner Becerra, you do have standards. They were adopted in the administrative interpretation. And whether or not the commission is satisfied with those standards isn't really the question in front of you tonight, right? The application is made. It needs to be evaluated under those standards. And you've heard that several times from several people this evening. And so my conversation with Mr. Hall is that suggesting that there aren't standards, inventing reasons on the fly that the project can't be supported is the very definition of arbitrary and capricious.
Thank you, Mr. Thornley. And I will appreciate that, appreciate your experience, but I'll respectfully disagree. We all here behind the dais have taken an oath, and that comes with a certain level of responsibilities. And there's a sign that adjacent to Mr. Hall and myself that reads "Pressure is a privilege," and I embrace that. And I believe that every commissioner, including our staff, embraces, and yourself, Mr. Thornley, as a member of this body before, or the city. It's not an easy one, but we'll get there.
Should we do the roll call? Oh, correct. We need a motion.
I'm happy to make a motion. In the matter of case number, make sure we're on the right thing. Case number LDC 25-00014, based upon compliance with the applicable findings, I move to approve the conditional use permit subject to the conditions listed in the staff report. Is there an additional condition that was not listed in the staff report?
Correct. The memo that was circulated to you today was 6 additional conditions requiring implementation of sustainability features that were proposed actually by the applicant. Yes.
My motion incorporates those additional conditions that were referenced in the memo referenced by Mr. Foster. And subject to those conditions, I can make all the findings.
Do we have a second?
Commissioner Draculich, I'll second.
Commissioner Armstrong?
Yes.
Commissioner Romeyer?
These are very hard decisions. I feel very split on character, which is finding number 5, that this is not like other uses. However, I recognize that what we're deciding on is what's in front of us today, and yes.
Commissioner Becerra?
No.
Commissioner Del Villar?
No, I cannot make findings for 2, 5, and 4.
Commissioner Villanueva?
Commissioner Villanueva, I have a question for legal. Can I abstain since I was not here at the last meeting? And I just feel like I don't have enough information to make a competent decision today.
No.
What are the requirements for abstention?
Typically, it would be a conflict. If you had a conflict, then you could abstain, but I haven't heard anything regarding a conflict. And we
No, it's just
and we also put the presentation on again for your benefit.
Yeah, I just feel like it would have been helpful to be here for the other discussions. So I can't, that's not an option, abstention's not an option.
Well, while you're contemplating that, I do just want to, again, point for the record, this is Commissioner Becerra, just give her a moment to breathe. I'm a no, because I can't make findings number 2 and number 5. And again, I'll provide written correspondence for the record to supplement my vote.
I really do think I can abstain if I wasn't here for the discussion the last time. I just feel like it would have been helpful to hear a lot more of the energy discussions that happened. Because I don't know that I'm ready to make a no or a yes. I believe an abstention is appropriate.
We have NV Energy here if you need any questions.
We can reopen the questions if
Well, procedurally, we are in the middle of there's a motion pending,
Yeah.
there's a second, we're in the middle of a roll call vote. We have votes cast. I would be averse to breaking is my preference, and I don't know procedurally if we can under the process.
Well, I'm going to abstain from this, and then I guess, if council wants to, I guess I'll just disagree with council. I'm just going to abstain. I just feel like I need more information. I can't make a thoughtful decision today. So that's what I'm going to do.
That would bring us to a 3-3 vote, which is a technical denial.
We have
No.
we have 4 A's.
Hold up, we only have,
Wait, with
can
an
we redo the roll
abstention?
call?
Sure.
We voted yes.
You've got 4.
We have, yes.
I haven't voted, so we don't have 4 yet. So we need to finish the roll call vote.
Yeah, you made the motion, Commissioner Belto.
Oh, fair,
Yeah.
my bad.
So I believe that's 4 and the motion passes. Is that correct?
Can you, this is Commissioner Becerra. My math is fuzzy after tonight. How many commissioners do we have tonight? And what's the vote if there's an abstention?
We have
Kelly,
7.
just for the record, can we do another roll call
Sure.
vote?
Are we going to have Alex make the motion again? Okay, go ahead.
Is it done?
It's on the record.
Can we get a concurrent, just a determination from legal?
We all witnessed it. It's on.
Perfect.
Well, what's the,
Callie, could you just read back which commissioners voted which way?
Sure, we got an aye from Commissioner Armstrong, a nay from Commissioner Becerra, nay from Commissioner Del Villar, an aye from Commissioner Draculich, an aye from Commissioner Romeyer, an aye from Commissioner Velto, and an abstention from Commissioner Villanueva.
In the matter of case LDC 250014 Web Data Center, your project is approved. Good luck with your data center.
y'all can breathe now.
I think we can take a few minutes just to stand, take a little breather, and then come back and finish the agenda. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Who are we missing? No, we're all here. Let's bring the meeting back to order. We're going to continue with item number 7, Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Liaison Report. I guess I could give that on behalf of the board. At our last meeting, we have, there were 3 meetings held to hear the public infrastructure plan, to hear the natural resources plan, to hear about the 2024 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan update. All of those were approved. It went through regional governing board. The 2024 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan was approved, so that effort is done. And again, I want to reiterate that, TMRPA is now interested in the data center issue, not just because the city of Reno requested it, but also because the city of Sparks is dealing with this issue. So that is going to come up on the January 23rd agenda. And that's all that I have as an update there. Moving to item number 8, staff announcements. Mike, do you want to let us know what's up?
Sure. Just a couple quick announcements. First, I'd like to thank Commissioner Armstrong for his service to this board tonight. As you know, is his last meeting. Wish you all the best in your new endeavors and in the move. Good luck to you, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, Mike, and everyone on the commission. I respect you very much and appreciate the time I've gotten to spend serving this body, and again, just working with all of you as colleagues. It's been a great opportunity and something I really care about. I grew up in Northern Nevada, and I've spent a lot of time in Reno since college, and it's a special place. So thank you so much.
Other than that, just some quick updates from council. At their last meeting, they did approve the Arrow Leaf zone change request that this board recommended approval of. At their next meeting, they will take up the Orcrest Drive zone change and Security Circle zone change at their next meeting. Staff is working on some additional trainings based on the requests made at the last meeting from Commissioner Becerra and Commissioner Romeyer. So those will be coming here within the next, probably in the next few meetings, just depending on caseload. We'll obviously space those out so we're not here till midnight, but we are working on those. And it's my understanding you might have some additional suggestions, so we'll note those here tonight. And that's all I had.
Very good. Item number 9, commissioner suggestions for future items. Yes, Dave.
Thank you, Chair. Question to Mr. Mike. Since this is Commissioner Armstrong's last hurrah, and I salute you, would you like to take care of business for the next meeting on that front, or should we wait?
At the beginning of the next meeting, we'll take a nominations for vice chair. Commissioner Romeyer will automatically become the new chairperson, and then we'll take nominations for a new vice chair, and the commission can vote.
Okay, perfect. Just housekeeping rules.
And I would like to ask, at the last meeting, I requested a presentation on what is happening with data centers and other communities and professional practice. NV Energy has mentioned that they gave a council and commission data center training to the city of Sparks. I would love to invite them to come give that same informational session here at our commission. So any other suggestions? Okay, closing number 9. We can open up to public comment. I don't see anyone in the chambers. Do we have anyone online?
We do not have anyone with their hand raised in Zoom, and I do not have any correspondence for this item.
May I make a public comment,
Yes.
Chair? Commissioner Becerra, for the record, since it is the Christmas season, holiday season, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you, including legal and staff, for making my experience so far a really good one. We have really hard, lengthy discussions at times. Obviously, we disagree on things, and I think that's the way it should be. It makes us better, and I applaud all of you. And Armstrong, wish you the best, and you come on back now, you hear?
Well, I think along those lines, happy holidays to all of our commission and to city for sticking with us through two late nights. All right, closing public comment, a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Excellent. Done.